I don't look like the normal YA reader, you know? I mean, and especially readers with female protagonists and antagonists. And I met Claire. Claire is also a volunteer at Semi High POPS, and we'll get to that in a bit. Yeah. And this is her most recent book of this long list of her books. And sorry to be a cliche, I couldn't put it down. I'm going to go back to before that. And so you've written all these books. And this is a room of writers and artists and photographers and filmmakers. And so my first question is, when did you start writing and why?
It's easier to answer the why, I think, and it'll answer the when. There was never anything else I could do. I grew up with my nose in a book. I just read all the time. I grew up in the old days where, I couldn't go online because it didn't exist yet. And sort of thank goodness, because now that I'm an adult, I can't get off the computer. So all I did was read. I just wanted to escape. I think I wasn't a wildly happy kid, so reading was an amazing escape from life and social demands that I didn't feel capable of meeting. So I read and I read and I read, and I think that left me with a very limited skill set. And so I wrote.
So if you can't do anything else.
Yes, but you have to have read a lot. I think it helps.
And early books, high school books that made a huge impact on you when you were the age of the people in this room.
Yeah, well, when I was the age of the people in this room, there really wasn't YA. It didn't exist. The only one was Judy Blume. Is anyone here? Do you know Judy Blume? She was writing books that were really aimed at teenagers, but very few other people were. So you sort of, at this age, you were reading either adult books or still rereading your childhood favorites, or both, which most of us were doing both. And so I really loved the classics, and it's always embarrassing because when I say it, it sounds like, God, who wants to hear that she liked, Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, Dickens? It's like no one wants to hear that. But the truth is, they're really fun. They're fun. They are. There's a reason why these authors have survived hundreds of years, and it's not because they're boring. It's because they're great.
And so you were 8, 10, 12, 15, 16, and...
I did grow up in the normal order.
Right. In Boston.
In the Boston area, yeah.
And at some point, having read all these books, the classics, at some point you decided to close the door to your room and start to write.
I did. I very early declared my intention and desire to be a writer. And my father would always say a writer is someone who writes. He was very into the idea. He really liked the idea that he'd have a daughter who was a writer. So that was his big quote, a writer is someone who writes. And I think you could probably extrapolate from that and say, an artist is someone who arts. No, I guess you can't extrapolate. But he really encouraged it a lot. And so I did what I could. I either wrote on my own or I wrote for school projects. One year there was a school, in high school, there was a writing competition, and I did parodies of some of my favorite authors. And, so I had a lot of fun with it and was still finding, my own voice. But I really did do a lot of writing even very early on.
So when you do, and almost everyone in here is doing something creative, a lot of writers are here. And
Cool.
When you write something in a first draft, what do you do when you're done with what you think is the completion of that first draft?
Okay, so first drafts are really hard. They're just hard. And the main thing that's hard about the first draft isn't actually the act of writing, it's the voice inside your head. I don't know if anyone else has that voice, but the voice inside my head says, this sucks over and over again. This is bad. Why are you even trying? This will never be good. This will never be done. This will never be what you thought it would be when you first decided to do whatever this project is. You had this dream in your head, you're not achieving it. And that's the hard part about the first draft to me. And I had a friend who put it really well. She said, you talk back to that voice. And you say to that voice, I'm sorry, I'm busy. I can't, you may be right. In fact, you probably are right. But I don't have time to talk to you right now. I'm just going to keep going forward. And you do, and you keep going forward, and you write one bad sentence after another bad sentence after another bad sentence, and maybe a good one sneaks in there. And then you have a draft, and you are going to rewrite that draft to death. But somehow, once you have a draft, making that better is the voice isn't nearly as nasty when you're revising something than it is when you're creating, at least in my experience.
Okay. So I think a lot of people in this room finish a first draft. There's a lot of essays, personal memoirs, short pieces here, and they get to it, and a lot of the stuff that's first drafts are very emotionally difficult that's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do with your first draft? Do you show it to someone? Do you sit in a room and read it again and mark it up? How do you go from that bridge from, well, some of this is good, some of it's not
Right.
good, to where do I go from here? Especially if it's emotional. You're in this writing, it's emotional. So what's that
Yes.
next step?
You know, there's a great book on writing by Stephen King. It's funny because I don't read that much Stephen King. I'm not that huge a fan of his writing, but I love his book on writing, which is called Literally on Writing, I believe. And one of the things he says is, after the first draft, you can really think in your mind about what the themes, and you think much more about the arcs in the book and less about each individual page. So as you're going back, you can really work on those. I don't like to show my work early on to anyone. I really don't. It feels very private. Before I feel like it's at all good, when it's still in that rough stage, I mean, it would be like walking in front of someone naked in a way. It's like this. I don't want you to know how bad my writing can be. I'm going to make it much, much better, and then I'll show it to someone. So I rewrite a lot. I'd say the actual first draft is a fraction of the writing process.
Okay, I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask you to give some advice to the writers in this room, and the artists and the filmmakers, and the sculptors, and the visual artists, of 3 tips about writing or something they can do. Either they can't get to the page, or they've got to the page and they've got a page and they need to go to the next step, or process, or...
Well, one thing would be, first of all, I do believe in reading if you want to be a writer, and I believe in looking at art if you want to be an artist. I mean, you expose yourself to whatever you can. I really think that's important. I think finding people you admire who are doing what you want to do and not copying them, but just exposing yourself to them. It all gets in there, and I think that's really important. I think, as I said, finishing something, starting something is easy. Finishing it is much, much harder. Even a first draft is hard to reach the end of. So make that your goal. Don't make your goal perfection, ever. That's maybe the biggest tip. Don't think this has to be perfect. Don't even think this has to be great. Think this has to be done. Because anything that's done can be made even better. But getting to that place where you have something that's done it's an amazing experience, and you can always improve what's there. But a lot of people don't ever know the pleasure of something that's completed. I think that's huge.
Which was your first book, and how old were you when it was published?
My first book was a novel for adults called Same as It Never Was. I already had 4 kids. I was not young. It's not the first book I wrote. I wrote many books before that. It was the first one I got published. And that's my other tip. Rejection. If you want to be published or whatever, have your art hung up on walls or whatever, you've got to see rejection as part of the process, not as an end at all. It is not ever an end. It is part of the process. And for every 20 rejections, you'll get an acceptance. You'll get a let's move forward with this project. And it hurt. I mean, it always hurts. But if you go on and start the next project before you get the rejection for the previous one, you'll be so invested in the next project, it won't even hurt as much as you think, and you'll be filled with an optimism for the next one. And it's it's that great, totally cliched line about you don't get a point if you don't make the shot. That you got to take the shot. You might or might not make the point, but you've got a chance.
I'm going to go to, this is Claire's latest book, Things I Should Have Known. She's kind enough to donate a few to the POPS Library, another to the Library. Can you give everyone a quick summary of it before I ask you specific stuff?
Yeah, I'm always bad at doing this. I'll try not to be boring. There are 2 sisters. One has autism, one doesn't. The one who doesn't, whose name is Chloe, narrates the book. And she wants to go off to college, but her sister's very dependent on her. And so she doesn't want her sister to be lonely when the time comes for her to go to college. So she wants her to have a social life. So she makes this her goal, is getting her sister a social life. And in the course of this, they meet a couple of guys, one of whom she already knows, one of whom has autism. And Chloe discovers she doesn't know everything about her sister. She thinks she does, but she doesn't. So she's both being very active, but also being a little clueless, and discovers it along the way.
So I'm reading this book and going, how does Claire, who's no longer a teenager, get into the mind of so many teenagers? I completely believe, I want everyone to read this book. I totally believe that you channeled yourself into, there's about 7 teenagers who come and go into adults. How do you become a 17-year-old high school student and a 20-year-old young lady who's in school who has autism? How do you do that?
Well, a lot of it, there is channeling who I was. There is a certain amount of observing my 4 kids who range from their teens to their 20s. I will admit to having a little bit of a ringer in my son, in that my son read through it for me. And there were a couple times where he said, "Mom, no one says," I think I had the phrase, I hope this is okay to say, rubbing their privates against each other. And he said, there isn't a teenager in the world who would use that phrase. So he came through and helped save me a few times. Yeah, I mean, sorry? I don't think teenagers have changed that much. I mean, that's one of the things I love about Austin is you can read something that was written in 1811, and there's still some stuff about being embarrassed by your family that I promise you is exactly what it feels like now to be embarrassed by your family. So I haven't forgotten everything from those years.
So you've written a number of novels for adults, a number for young adults, and 2 nonfiction books.
Co-wrote, yeah, with an expert.
Would you talk a little about that?
Yeah, so those are about autism. My oldest son is on the autistic spectrum. He was diagnosed when he was about 2.5 or 3. And, we did a ton of therapies and research, and I ended up connecting with this wonderful woman who had a clinic at UCSB. She's now actually up north at Stanford, but that's where she was. And she asked me if I was willing to co-write a couple books with her, or actually it started with 1 book and then we wrote another, because she wanted to get what they do out into the mainstream world. And it's really, they ended up being books that were really about just how to raise a kid in a weird way, because while a lot of things are a little heightened with kids with autism, or very heightened, the basic rule about figuring out if someone gets upset about something, it's not coming out of nowhere. So you think about, why is this person upset? And let's figure out a way to prevent that. You don't just say, oh my God, he's upset, control the situation now. It's about being a thoughtful parent or clinician or therapist. It's a lot about being thoughtful.
I've taught here, and a lot of teachers here. Every semester we have a student who has autism, we have special ed teachers, resource teachers here. What should we as teachers, adults, and as classmates know that would help everybody when you're in a class and you have a student who has autism?
Everyone wants to be accepted, and everyone, the world is better if we accept everyone. And if we don't draw lines in the sand and say, you're different from me, I don't want to know you, I don't want to be on your side, whatever. And I feel like it's true in every aspect of life, that diversity enriches a society, and trying to make everyone fit into one cookie cutter mold is detrimental. So, and it's often easy for us to see it, with big differences, but something where someone thinks differently is sometimes a little trickier, because when someone doesn't think like you, it's easy to say, whoa, you don't think like me, I don't know, But I think anytime you can meet someone where that person is, if you know someone with autism who's obsessed with something, and a lot of times there are things like trains or whatever, there are some cliched ones, but most of them have a very strong interest. If you can ask them questions about their interest, you're halfway there to really connecting to them.
I have one question, and then we'll open it up to everybody. Tell us about being a volunteer at POPS High.
I love it so much. I love it so much. It's like this. We talk. We haven't yet had a presentation like this, but I love the kids. I'm very happy they're coming. They're like you guys. I mean, they're great. They're respectful. They listen. They talk. We're sharing a lot of stories and a lot of experiences, and I look forward to Monday all week long.
We have a few minutes. Anybody have a question for Claire about anything? Spit them.
What's your favorite writing prompt that you use at Samuel POPS for kids?
So we have been spending a lot of time getting to know the kids and haven't really used the curriculum yet. Last time we did, I love the 6-word stories. Do you guys know the famous Hemingway 6-word story? That supposedly, it may be apocryphal, but supposedly someone said to Ernest Hemingway, who was famous for writing very concisely, could you tell a story in 6 words? And his response was, for sale, baby shoes never used. And that was a story. That is a story. And so I had the kids do 6-word stories about themselves. And I said it could be a story, it could just be adjectives, whatever you want. And there was one really amazing one by a young person, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it was something like, you can never know the truth. And I just thought, wow, mystery and unresolvable mystery in 6 words.
Amari, do you have a question?
Oh. So when you're writing, you know how like you kept saying like rough drafts, do you mean like you take it like step by step, or like you would write the whole book and then like take steps like that?
It varies a little bit. I mean, I'm working to getting a whole entire book written in rough form. But I will admit that, especially if I walk away from the project because something distracts me and I come back, I'll often start at the beginning again and read through what I've done. And while I'm reading through it, I'm probably revising and changing because it's impossible for me to read my writing and not want to do that. But when I'm really in the thick of writing, I'm trying to be the little engine that could and just keep going and keep going and keep going and get a whole draft out, because I know that it's a gift to myself, that once I have something completed, I'm happy to keep revising it. That's easy compared to getting it out, so I just try to keep chugging along and get anything. And often toward the end, it gets really ragged because I'm so desperate to finish a draft. So yeah, I'm always pushing for that finish line.
Time for 1 or 2 more questions. Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? I'm going to. Oh.
What moved you forward to wanting to get involved in the POPS Club at Samuel High?
Honestly, the election last year got me wanting to do a lot more things than I was already doing. I was leading a certain kind of a life, and I was devastated by the election last year. And I needed to find a way to stop feeling devastated and to do something useful with my unhappiness. And so I was looking around for volunteer. I'm also going to volunteer at a crisis text line, which you should all know about, that there is a crisis text line if you're ever in crisis. And I happened to meet a friend who knew Amy Friedman.
Who I know.
Yes, who Mr. Danziger knows a little bit. And she told me about POPS, and I thought, wow, that sort of hits my sweet spot right now with the writing and the talking. I like to talk. I like to eat. It sort of felt perfect. And Samuel High is close to home, so it was great in all sorts of ways.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. I should have done this because we need to get this on camera. Would you just read an excerpt, even if it's only 1 paragraph, or the beginning, or something you love?
Sure. I have 1 paragraph that I really like to read. I read this to the class. They're at a food court in a mall, and they're the 2 sisters I described. They're there with 2 other kids, 2 brothers, one of whom has autism and one doesn't. And the one with autism has just burnt his mouth on a hot chili. His name is Ethan, and Ivy is the sister with autism. Okay. So he's crying out because his mouth hurts. And this is narrated by Chloe. Ivy's sitting at the table watching Ethan with impassive curiosity as she steadily chews and swallows her own food. There are bits of rice on her shirt and in her hair, which I got her to wear brushed and down tonight, instead of in a ponytail. And there's also some kind of brownish sauce on her chin and at the corners of her mouth. Ethan wails some more. An elderly couple is walking by, and the man maneuvers around his wife so he can put himself between her and our group. He's being gallant. It hurts, especially because he's probably just some sweet old guy who loves his wife and wants to protect her from bad things. But Ivy and Ethan aren't bad things.